When I was a useful model builder in the late 1940s through the 1950s, models kits were transitioning from being all wood to being mostly plastic. My first model kit was a B-29 wood kit by Sprombecker. It was their top-of-the-line kit. My father and I built it. That means that he built it and I thought I did. This certainly got me hooked on model airplanes. In my neighborhood there was a house that had a garage door which swung open, and behind it was a great display of kits for sale. I made some really bad choices there because I knew nothing about modeling and had very little funds. Modeling knowledge increased from the instructions from my father and from the big kids in the neighborhood. I learned the relative difficulties of the different types and brands of kits. I learned that pretty much you got what you're paid for, and I certainly learned that I was a beginner. Another great source of information about my new hobby was, surprisingly enough, the school library. I don't remember what grade I was in, but there was 1 hour of library class in that grade. After being taught to use the library, we were allowed to pick our book, and after exhausting the whole shelf on dinosaurs, I found there was a shelf about hobby model magazines. The two building model magazines were Air Trails and Model Airplane News. Model Airplane News was mostly about flying models, U-control models, flying models that used a gas engine, and these were subjects beyond my ability and finance. Air Trails contained that kind of information also, but it also covered scale display models, model building and flying scale models that did not involve power by an engine, generally involving rubber bands or a very strong throwing arm, or both. A third source of information was advertisements printed on the boxes of the actual model. In this video, I hope to show some of the advertisements for scale models during this transition from wood to plastic. The historical information is based on my memory, which is not the greatest. If you're interested in well-documented company histories, two good sources are listed at the end of this video. Ace seemed to be a small company and produced only model cars. They chose their subjects carefully such that they could be constructed with sheets of balsa and blocks of balsa glued together and then sanded to the shape, producing a reasonable facsimile of a car. Aurora started as a plastic model company and did not make wood models before. They went on to model a wide range of subjects, and being one of the three most prolific makers, Aurora, Monogram, and Revell. I'm sad to say that at least two of these, Aurora and Revell, being only plastic model makers, didn't advertise in model airplane magazines that I have access to and are almost unrepresented in this record. Berkeley kits were usually gas engine powered. They made U-control, free flight, and even radio control kits at that time. They did produce wood model display cars. They also produced a spectacular ad the last 2 pages of every month of Air Trails. Cleveland existed before World War II and had an extensive catalogs of kits coming into this time frame. They continued to add new kits for aircraft that were designed in this very prolific period for aircraft evolution. Most of the kits were stick and tissue flying models, mostly scale. Cleveland stopped making kits somewhere in the 60s or 70s, I think, but you could still buy their plans by mail order. I don't know if you still can. Cleveland was one of the 3 main makers of stick and tissue models, the other 2 being Comet and Gillows. Comet also existed before World War II and carried their kits over into this time frame. Early in this time frame, they also made solid balsa wood display models of both aircraft and cars. Later, they concentrated on stick and tissue flying and flying scale models and sheet balsa wood models built to be flying models. I think Gillows bought Comet at some point. Dynamodels made high-end 1/48 scale fighter plane kits of balsa. The fuselages were carved, the wings were cut out in plan view. The kits featured cast metal details like propellers, landing gear, etc. This feature allowed them to produce the best scale models, I think, that didn't involve the use of plastic parts. Had Cleveland and Comet, Gillows also existed before World War II and entered this period with a substantial numbers of kits in production. Most of their kits were stick and tissue flying models. They continued in production far beyond the other 2 stick and tissue makers and are still operating today. They also made small scale display models constructed of balsa wood and paper cut from the plans. They were pretty basic, but covered a wide number of airplanes and could be had for somewhere between a dime and 25 cents. This ad for helicopters for industry ran for a long time in magazines, but I never saw such a model. Hawk Models was an established wood kit model maker that transitioned directly into plastic. Lindbergh, or the Lindbergh line, evolved from previous wood model flying models into a plastic model company. For you armor modelers, there actually was a company in the wood model era that made a line of tank models, Mercury models. Unfortunately, I don't think it survived into the plastic era. Monogram models manufactured a series of flying models, scale models, made of a combination of stick and tissue and balsa sheet. They were called Speedy Built kits. A feature of these kits that foretold the future was the inclusion of plastic parts, plastic propellers, cowls, armament, and canopies, and other details were made of plastic. Another line they produced later in this time frame were called super kits. They were 1/72nd fighter planes made of solid balsa wood carved almost completely to shape with plastic details. They produced then 4 bomber kits that were not meant to fly, but were extremely detailed and were a combination of wood, balsa, and plastic. The next series of kits they made were all plastic, entering into the plastic era. They became one of the main plastic model providers of American kits, and then eventually merged with Revell. Revell started during this time frame. They were a plastic model kit maker from the start. Some of their first kits were called Highway Pioneers. They were very old cars that were made by another vendor and marketed by Revell. These Highway Pioneers were the first successful plastic kits as far as I'm concerned. I've built other kits before them, but they were so bad I wouldn't do it again, and I can't remember the names of the manufacturers. The Highway Pioneer has produced a cute little car. It was easy to build, and there was a lot of them. Revell grew to be probably the most prolific American manufacturer of plastic models, although Aurora might have been there. They made a wide variety of subjects, from armored cars, boats, and aircraft, and more. Revell and Monogram ultimately merged, but it was complicated. Top Flight made flying scale balsa models. Their designs emphasized flying. They were lightweight, well constructed of only balsa wood, and flew better and longer than other kits of the same type. Strombecker was probably the primary maker of solid wood models during this time. Their models were not made of balsa wood, but were carved out of softwood to a near finished form. They were well designed such that installation of one part onto the other set the parts at the right position and did not require judgment from the builders. They produced a very complete catalog of aircraft. They also modeled ships and trains. As the plastic model era began, Strombecker produced several plastic model kits. They also produced a lot of plastic slot car models. They then sold their business over a period of time and completely exited the business. This list barely scratches the surface of this subject, as there were many more model kits that I have no experience with or didn't even know about. In addition, there were kits being made in parallel with these in most of the countries of the world that I haven't even considered, even though I did have experience with some of them. I started to list kits that fell into these two categories, but the lists quickly got out of hand and would have been incomplete no matter how much I had worked on them. 2 good sources for company histories are listed at the end of this video. I hope this video gives you some idea of the evolution of the highly detailed model kits that we enjoy in great numbers today. Thanks for watching.